Welcome back to the Artefactors Union. I'm your host and foreman, Douglas Scoundrels, and today we are assembling a hot mommy and a tree with a nose. This is the Heartspike box, Heartspike box, for the Neverborn faction, the Fae and Nephilim. Keyword box contains two models, Ithana, this lovely lady here, and, this tree. The Carnivorous Wyrdwood. That was our artwork. Here's our renders, looking fairly similar to the artwork. Sadly, okay. Let's look at the sprue. Okay, not a ton of pieces here, but a decent amount of complexity, and also I've been told that especially the Wyrdwood is fairly difficult to assemble. So we'll do that last. We'll start with Ithana first, and let's take a look at her instructions. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with grabbing the body, and then we'll add the flower that's sort of attached to her base leg. We'll go ahead as well as do the leg, the two flowers that are attached to her body, her left arm, and her right arm. And then we'll do the two pieces of the hair here and here. And once we're done with that, we will combine the two pieces of the base to her bottom. Yeah, I think that'll work. So let's go ahead and grab C11, and then C10 and C4. Okay, here's our body. Our connection for C10 is going to be at the bottom. The flower is going to be here, and then there is a connection point on the stalk right there. I'll show you that connection point real quick. There, you can see the tooth right there. Okay, the connection at the bottom is not that concerning. It's just more of a point of reference. You really want it to stick nicely to where it's connecting to her body up here. There is a point where it will sit solidly and not want to wiggle, and that way you know it's in the right spot. Okay, C4, the leg, I'm going to go right along here. Leg. Fits just fine. Alright. Now, our next two pieces are going to be C3 and C8, the two flowers. C8 is going to fit on her hip right there, and C3 is going to be right on her chest. Let's look at those real quick. C3 is the one with the long, I don't know if that's a stem or a leaf or whatever. But okay, let's do C8 on the hip and then C3 on the chest. Alright, there is C8. There's our seam. I had a bit of a hard time getting this one to fit in there correctly. I was doing it incorrectly in that I was trying to make it line up along this seam in a way I found perfect, and that just wasn't turning out for me. And it turns out I just put a lot of pressure on the flower while pushing it, in this direction towards the bit we just put on, and that ended up sort of having it slot in really nicely. So that's how I got that in there. But keep trying, because there shouldn't be any gaps, at least any significant gaps. Okay, let's do C3 on the chest. It's quite easy. Just make sure that the leaf is matching the render. You see here where it's pointing downwards, and not a problem at all to get that in there correctly. But now we can move on to the arms. Let's do C1, our right arm, the one with the skull first, and then C2, the left arm holding the big sword. The right arm will go right there, holding the skull up. And left arm will connect here as well as here, where she is effectively pressing the hilt of the sword into her torso. Another just slightly awkward attachment, but if you check her elbow in the back, it'll definitely tell you whether or not you got it right. Alright, let's do the left arm. Yeah, this one pretty easy. As long as you press where the hand and the sword meet the torso, it'll just sort of align the elbow for you, more or less. Okay, let's combine the two pieces of the hair and then plop that on her head. Well, two pieces of the head should be the front and then the back, combine them, and then we'll plop them on the head. Sorry, I have that upside down. I like to keep things oriented correctly if possible. So C5 and C6. Front half plus the back half Describing the orientation is kind of weird. Just follow this and the render, and it should be good. Looks real good. All right, let's plop this onto our model's body. Headless Ithana, head full Ithana, just full of head. That's very pretty. That one on easy. Okay, let's grab our last two bits and get her some basing, I guess. C7 is going to pop onto her front, and then it will sort of slide into C9. Be done. Before and after, you are not trying to align her bottom, the bottom of her body, with the bottom of the bit. It's really telling here, if you look, and the camera will focus, how it lines up. So you're mostly attaching her to the top of the bit, and you want to put pressure on the top of it. Try not to put pressure on the bottom down here, otherwise it will separate the two bits. Now let's do the last one from the back. Oh yeah, there we go. Looks real nice. Now let's just put her on a base. Ithanna is done. The hardest part was the flower on her hip, trying to figure out that orientation, although also figuring out the base was a little weird. Other than that, everything went into really nicely where it was supposed to go. I'm really happy with this box, so far at least. Let's move on to the harder one, though. Definitely the harder one, the tree. Alright, here is our Carnivorous Wyrdwood, and I'm going to quickly go over the assumed order that a friend gave to me before we look at the instructions. Do G7, add it to G6, then add G9, G8, G10, G2, G1, G4, G5, and then finish with G3. Now let's look at the instructions. Here is G7. G6 is going to go on the right side of it. All right, right along here. It's going to be kind of an awkward connection because there's no like solid thing bracing the two together. You just have to make sure that there's very little gap, and it'll help once I show you the other side of this though. Here's the two of them combined. You barely see the seam. Looks really good from this side. Let's look at the bottom as well. It's always a good point of reference to make sure things look correct. Those are pretty flush. And then we also look at the back side, which is probably the best way to tell that they are together. And well, you should barely be able to see sunlight in that crack, or none at all, if things worked out perfectly. Okay, the G9 is our next piece. It's going to go along here. G9 is mostly like basing stuff, not really a good chunk of the side of the tree, except for this little bit here. You can see the connection. Again, pretty solid. You want to make sure you don't fold it too far inwards. Remember, we're doing the circumference of a tree, and so we want to make sure that it is turned as far outward as possible. That'll give you the tightest connection for the two bits. All right, our next part is going to be G8, I think. Let me double check my list. Yes, G8. It will pretty much fill in this gap right here and sort of go over the top of these skulls at the same time. There we go. Okay, this one took a good amount of fiddling just to get it as good as I could. Still a really nice fit, really hard to see the seam, although the most obvious spot in the part that I was referencing and making sure would fit perfectly is that seam right here, and that continues down the body of the tree. Nudging it so that it's closed while sort of also making sure that the seam along here lines up with the sort of ridge on top of the skull. Took a little while. I ended up re-gluing, getting cement in that seam just to make sure that I could really fill in that gap. But it looks good now. Let's check out from here, and then also look at the inside, which is probably a good point of reference for you. Right. Okay, I believe our next piece is G10. We're just going to be continuing around the body of the trunk. Our G10 will be fitting right here. Okay, that one was at least fairly easy. There's our base, Let's quickly look. That would covers up everything. Okay, looks good. Now we get the face of the tree G2, and then the other side of the face of the tree G1. Alright, we're going to change things up from my initial instructions. We're going to do G1 first, which glue down here, as well as up here on this half. And then once we're done with that, we'll go ahead and do G3, which is the top of the tree. So we're going to basically install the entire frame of the face first, and then do G2, the face of the tree. Here is G1 added. You can see the seam down there, as well as the seam back here. A quick look at our base. That's pretty good. So now let's add G3, which is almost shaped like a hat, flowing back behind the model. Okay, you can see what it looks like on the inside, as well as the seam going around the tree. Now let's slap G2 the face on there. It's a face. Might do a little bit of squishing just to fill in a few of the gaps you can see light through, but still overall pretty good. Pretty well attached. Next, second to last, G4. Briar, shush. Okay. Be going right there. Alright, never mind. We do need to put G5 in here first. It should fit in this gap. Not fully. It shouldn't fully enclose the gap, though. Okay, and the point of reference you want to make sure that it's nice and flat is right here. These don't have to be perfect. I understand why my friend suggested not doing them first, because if you don't know, that might lead to worse gaps on the tree around here. So if this needs to be shaved a little bit, go ahead and shave it, but it's the least important one to get good and fit with everything else. Worry about more of these seams on the tree that's actually visible. Okay, now let's add our last piece in there. It'll just barely scrunch in there, but it'll fit. Okay, yeah, it took a little bit of fiddling, but not as much as I was expecting. It just popped in pretty easily. I would lead with the top of the branch, try to angle it in so this part up here goes in first. That seemed to make it a lot easier for me. But we are done with the Carnivorous Wyrdwood. Put them on a base. The Carnivorous Wyrdwood is done. Hardest part was probably just maintaining the shape of the tree without the base in there. I still agree with my friend that the base is going to probably muck things up more than it will help, but overall I didn't really have any sort of difficulty. It was just kind of a weird start because you're just going around an empty space with these tree shapes, and yeah, it ended up looking really, really nice and fitting pretty snugly, so I'm happy with it. Be careful with the branches. They're pretty small. They're going to be easy to bend and easy to snap off. And that's really it. Let's look at the whole box. The Heartspike box is done, containing one Ithana and one Carnivorous Wyrdwood. And the majority of the difficulty was in the tree over the one flower on Ithana. Gave me some headaches. And really just got to be careful and make sure things look good and look like they fit good on the tree, and you should have an okay time. But with two models, I don't have a whole ton to say. They're very, well, one is very pretty and one is... I have been your host and foreman, Douglas Scoundrels, helping you build a better Malifaux. Enjoy your nature, folks. Things. Monsters. Mommies.